What if I told you I knew almost every book you should probably read if you wanted to get into chaos as a faction? Yeah, that's right. If you click the video, I'm going to assume it's because you're interested in what I have to tell you when it comes to chaos and all that good stuff. So we should probably get into it. But a little forewarning, there's going to be a lot of books I've read and also some books I haven't read yet, but obviously a lot more intelligent people than me who've read countless more novels than me recommend. But first, we're going to start with the basics of what I know when it comes to chaos. So right off the bat, of course, we're going to start with the Night Lords trilogy. And you're probably thinking, Connor, of course. And you'd be right, of course. This book is awesome. From characters, Talos, Uzas, the Exalted. There's so many good characters in here that I can go on and on about each and every one of them individually. But I'm not gonna, because that would be a really long video, and the retention rate on these videos wouldn't do so well, would they? No, but it is a really good book. If you really want to start with a really hefty chaos book, I would recommend this. This goes really, really into depth about how war bands function, and you get a really good inside look of how their day-to-day operations are, who's in charge, how these, the interrelationships of chaos war bands are, how they fluctuate, and you get some really good lore dropped in there from, especially because it's a Night Lords book, a lot of Night Lords lore. And I wasn't the biggest Night Lords fan. I'm still really not. But this book obviously made me way more interested in them than I originally was. So if you want, I feel like this is a really, really safe choice. If you're just starting with Chaos and, you think it's kind of lame, read this. Even if you're not into Night Lords, seriously, I could not recommend this enough. So now we've got the Night Lords out of the way. The classic safe choice, I would say, if you're literally just getting into Chaos as a whole and you want to give it a solid try. So let's get a little more specific. Let's say you're not feeling Night Lords. You're a little bored of Night Lords. You think they're a little edgy for your taste. I'm not a big fan. Conrad Curse is basically Batman if he was just a little more depressed. I agree. So here's another one I'd recommend. Ahriman, the Omnibus. But really, you can read any of his stories. And the reason I'm going to say Ahriman is because you get a good glimpse of how the Thousand Sons are sort of operating. Now, obviously, you're getting a more focused view of his warband as a whole, but you get a lot of Thousand Sons lore and, how they operate in their warbands and whatnot. And to preface, you don't really need, if you have a basic understanding of what happened in the Heresy, who Ahriman is and what his goals are, the Rubicon changing his legion back from dust and constantly getting screwed over by Tzeentch, you're good. You don't really need to know a whole lot about Magnus, although I would recommend you read some of it because Prospero Burns and all that good stuff is really good, and you're doing yourself a favor by getting the context into this. But it's a good book. It's trippy. It's a Tzeentch book, so of course there's chaos, shenanigans ensued. And, it's a really warp-heavy book, so obviously quantum physics and everything's wonky and donkey. But it's a good book, and you get to see the inner glimpse of Ahriman. And if you're into wizards and space shit, this is it. This is literally the book for you. It's a really good read. It's a little slow at times, but I would recommend it. I really would. His short stories are good, and all the characters are, for better or worse, kind of almost the same. And what I mean by that is just they all kind of share the goal. Follow Ahriman. Ahriman does his own thing, sacrifices people. Not really a spoiler because that's kind of how it is with Chaos. But again, really good book. You can't really go wrong with it. I don't think so anyway. So now moving on from that. Let's say you're not feeling space wizards. You see these little dusty boys and you're like, Connor, listen, I've read that. I hate Ahriman's lame, and I hate the Thousand Sons. I'm a space wolf, yada, yada, yada. Cool. So let me put you on to something else. Renegades of the Long War. So this is the first book actually that put me on to Chaos as a whole, because funnily, if you've been here long enough, here's some lore. My first ever purchase was Eisenhorn, and I did not enjoy it. It just wasn't for me. We're not getting into that though. This is a great book. You have Lucius the Faultless Blade, Karn, Eater of Worlds, Sons of the Hydra, and another Lucius short story, but this gives you the most bang for your buck when it comes to the broader view of Chaos. So obviously, Lucius, Karn, and some Alpha Legion stuff. I'm not going to touch on that because I don't remember the Alpha Legion stuff off the top of my head, and I'm also not the biggest Alpha Legion fan. But that being said, Lucius the Faultless Blade is pretty good if you like the Emperor's Children or you want to get into the Emperor's Children. You get to see this smug bastard pretty much duel people all the time, and you get to see some of the inner workings of his mind and how he views his relationships with his warband, and even Fabius Bile's in there, and you get to see, of course, just how he fights and how the Legion is just fractured. It's good for that. And then Karn, obviously, oh my god. Karn, Eater of Worlds was a really good book. They touch upon the Battle of Scalathrax. They don't go into it, they cuts off at that. But you get some really, really good World Eaters, lore. Now, is it like Betrayer? No. But Betrayer, I would recommend you really should read Betrayer. But this is just, again, you get really good glimpses of both World Eaters and the Emperor's Children. And there's also a point in here I would really, if you really do read this book, and my favorite part of this book actually is there's a slight friendship formed between a World Eater and a Emperor's Children, and it's really kind of touching, even though they end up, I think, spoiler alert, they're probably going to kill each other, so, be warned. But this is just really good overall, because this is the broadest thing. So, like, the Night Lords would be the entry level where you get to see how everything is. This is almost at that level where it shows you the basics, and, of course, the time, it's like, this is right after the Siege of Terra, and then it goes a little bit more into 40k. But I think you really shouldn't be concerned if you're reading these books. Don't get too hung up on the timeline and what's currently happening and what's past lore. If you're an overthinker like me, I would just say don't think about it, because honestly, you'll stress yourself out if you feel like you have to hold yourself to a certain standard and read things in an order. I'm reading the Heresy in order, but I've also skipped books, and this is before I got dedicated to reading it in order. No one cares. It's how you read is your own journey, and you're free to enjoy it however you want. So, sorry about the tangent, but again, really good book, really broad view of Chaos as a whole, as well as more specific deep dives into the legions like the World Eaters and the Emperor's Children. Really good. Again, I can't recommend this enough. I would put this in the same tier as the Night Lords Omnibus. Some people might get a little tight at that, but it's just a personal opinion. This is what put me on the most. So we just covered that. So what else? Let's say you're not feeling any of that. Let's say you want something fresh, something crazy. Then I would also recommend the Fabius Bile trilogy. There has been no greater joy to me than personally that whole trilogy. Seeing Fabius Bile and all his other apothecaries like Sakara and just Korak Singe, who's a Death Guard apothecary, blows it out of the water. That is some of the best chaos you'll ever see. You'll see Emperor's Children, World Eaters, Word Bearers. You get the glimpse. So like Renegades of the Long War, you do get a generalized view of chaos relationships with other warbands and other chaos legions. But Fabius is such an interesting character, and if you haven't read anything involving him, I just recommend you do it. Even if you read some of his shorter stories, I just cannot recommend him enough. From Manflayer, Primogenitor, Clone Lord, they're all fantastic, and they have some interesting plot points and themes. Mainly, again, in the second book, there's a clone of Fulgrim. That's a lot of people's favorite thing to bring up. What if Clone Grum came back? But we're not talking about him in this video. Trizin, there's a lot of crossover, a lot of characters who mishmash and talk with Fabius Bile. You see even Fulgrim in his corrupted form. If you like the Emperor's Children, but you're not feeling the space like Lucius, and you don't want to deal with the pompous attitude that it typically becomes of the Emperor's Children, go to Fabius, because it's a different flavor of pompous asshole, because this guy knows more than most civilizations will ever learn. Like, he's forgotten more than any civilization will learn, is a quote from one of his books. So you get to see Drukari. Like, again, when I say broad view of chaos, it is broad, but Fabius has some shenanigans that really give you a fun glimpse into the setting as a whole. And just the stories are really good. Like, the characterization is really on point. And it's entertaining, because you're not limited by the loyalist perspective where it's for the Emperor, Codex Astartes. It's chaos. Everything's loosey-goosey with it. You know, there's violence, death, betrayal at literally every turn, and it's hysterical at some points. It is literally hysterical. In the third book, he's dealing with Drukari, and the Drukari literally are like, yeah, he's a dumb, Monkai, but he's literally so funny. He is such a creative goofball, and we love him, and he would have made a pretty good Drukari. And you see what I'm talking about? Like, it's awesome. Like, he's a mad scientist. He's got friggin' skin cape on him. He's got a skull that tortures literally anybody, and he's a character. And if you haven't read anything, read it. Mad scientist literally becomes like a quasi-god, basically. This dude is creating abomination after abomination. And if that doesn't pique your interest, I don't know. You know what? Here. If that doesn't pique your interest, I have this. There's his daughter. Oh my god, yes. Melusine is another really good character. So just read the book, please. You know, the dude's crazy, basically has a daughter, so many shenanigans. It's goofy. It is so goofy. It's like Rick and Morty, but like obviously without that like Justin Roiland comedy, and more everything's a tragedy, so it's kind of funny in an insane way, you know? So moving on from that, are we really, you get a little bit of Emperor's Children. God, Connor, you're talking about Emperor's Children quite a bit, aren't you? I guess I am. Well, since we're on the topic, Fulgrim. Now, I know what you're thinking. Connor, it's a 30K book, dude. Why would I, unless I'm really reading the Heresy, should I really even read it? Like, come on. I guess. I don't know, dude. I just work here, but I love this book. This is a really good book. And of course, they start loyalist, but then you get to see the Lair and Blade, and, if spoiler alert, he kills Ferris, man, it's not really a spoiler, but I guess if you're new, it is. But don't worry about that. Ferris is... Yeah, I don't really have anything to say about him, which is pretty much the common consensus when it comes to him. But this is the perfect book for Emperor's Children. We get to see them pre-corruption, but we also see that they were always kind of doomed by the way that they act, and it's a tragedy. Everybody in this book is kind of just, their fates are awful. No, there's no happy ending, and that's like a theme for Warhammer, but this is the perfect book for the Emperor's Children, I think, Forget Lucius and forget Fabius Bile, even though they're both in this book. This is the Legion, from perfection to hedonists who literally will kill each other and make them into drugs and snort each other. Perfect book. So, again, really, really good book. So almost every book that I think you should read if you want to get into it. Obviously, there are so many more books, and am I going to be able to cover all of them? No, because your boy still hasn't read all of them. But obviously, I made some, allusions to Betrayer, really good book. And there's definitely more. First Heretic, if you like Word Bearers. And even, I would also say, you should really read the Word Bearers Omnibus. Prior to this, I did not give a single piece of attention to Word Bearers as a whole. And the reason for that is because I knew nothing about them. I didn't read about them, but I had a commenter because I made a previous video about, all the underrated, one reason every Chaos Legion is underrated, right? And I had a commenter who said, he gave a differing opinion about the Word Bearers, because I said they were really versatile in a meta way. You can put them into anything, like they're in the Inquisitor video game, you can put them into, let's say, Space Marine 2 even, I don't know. But you can fit them in like tabletop, or not even tabletop, in like, let's say, the Rogue Trader game that is currently out. They fit in places. But this commenter kind of went into the fact that they're versatile in the way that their order is, it's insane because they're the most organized Chaos Legion. But even then, their hierarchy is just really interesting. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And I gave it a read, and I could not recommend it enough. Every character there has some level of appeal. Like, truly. Marduk, Jarlek, they're all word bearers, and they all have different interpretations of the word of Logar, even though they all agree on the same consensus, but obviously it's the little details that lead to the little hierarchical, establishments, and they also the political infighting and backstabbing. It's a really good Chaos book, but it put me on, and it's interesting. It's a really, really good book. So, am I missing some? Absolutely. You want to drop some more in the comments? What people should read to get into Chaos? Drop them. And you know what? To end this, I'm going to have an honorable mention. Eisenhorn. And you're probably thinking this has pretty much nothing to do with Chaos. Well, you're probably not actually thinking that. You're actually probably thinking, okay, there's some Chaos in there, but why would you put this in with Chaos? Well, a lot of people recommend this book for Xenos. It's a really good book as a story, and a lot of people start with Xenos as, the online consensus anyway. But I'm bringing it up not just because of the Slaaneshi cult and then all the conspiracies and secrets. That could appeal to a lot of you. And I thought it would appeal to me, but in this particular instance it didn't. But there were a certain, part of the book that really got to me, and it was the Ceruthi. The Ceruthi are Xenos that are influenced by Chaos. And I thought that was really interesting because we don't get to see a lot of Chaos and Xeno intermingling. You do in Fulgrim with the Lair, but I recommended that for a different reason, because you get to see the Legion rise and fall, which is in essence Chaos. You get to see them devolve into hedonism, and it's beautifully tragic. The Ceruthi, on the other hand, are a really rare instance for me when I was reading a book and I saw this Xenos race, minor Xenos if you will even, interact and mingle with Chaos and get, mutated from it. And I could not recommend it enough for that one aspect, because we don't get to see a lot of that. We don't see minor Xenos really getting a lot of emphasis. You could see that with the Kroot more, and that's what I've been noticing. There's some more predominant Kroot characters who are really cool. But the Ceruthi are just a really rare instance of Chaos and Xenos and all that jazz. So ending that with, we're ending the video with that honorable mention. But again, if you guys, I obviously missed a lot of books, but these are the books I really would recommend just to get into, Chaos as all. And Lords of Silence. Lords of Silence is a really, really good book for Death Guard. You get to see Mortarion, and, the warp is not, non-linear, so he's experiencing the future in a different way. And then it's cool. Please, just Typhus has a cameo. Really cool. And it's, if you want real in-depth view of how the Death Guard operations work, read that book. And they're fun. All the characters are actually really good. And I know I've been saying that for a lot of the Chaos books, but that should really speak to the Chaos books and the authors. They do a really good job of making these characters likable, even though they're the worst people on Earth. And that says a lot for a universe like 40K. So again, did I miss books? Absolutely. You want to recommend some? Please feel free, because listen, I'll read the books. People comment books, I buy them. I spend my hard-earned money, on those books. I love to read, and I love to, develop the knowledge. I'm not a lore master by any stretch of the imagination, but I appreciate the lore, and I love it. So you got any recommendations for people, or me included, drop them in the comments. And that's it, guys. Other than that, those were the Chaos books I'd really recommend if you want to get into Chaos as a faction. So other than that, guys, thank you so much for watching, if you watched all the way through, and I will see you later.